What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about top to bottom what a perfect quarterback throwing motion should look like and what they're expecting of you at the Division I level. So we're going to talk about everything from how you should hold the ball, should you have a low arm slot or a high arm slot, what should your hips be doing, everything. So I hope this video gives you some value. Let's get started. Now, the first thing we're going to talk about is ball carriage, you guys. Where should you be holding the football? Should it be up here on the shelf? Should it be low? Should it be down here? Should it be up by the ear? First thing I want to say, though, guys, every single quarterback is different. Every single human on earth has a different genetic makeup. Everybody has a different body type. Like, guys, so don't get so caught up in like, oh, I want to throw like him, or oh, I want to throw like Aaron Rodgers or whoever. Have your own motion, but there are mechanical efficiencies that every single quarterback needs to have, and that's our philosophy. That's what we try to teach, and that's what we're going to walk you through today, because these are the things that they expect of you at that Division I level. So as far as like ball carriage goes, you want to be relaxed. A lot of quarterbacks will hold the ball center of the chest. Some have it more so on the right pec. The most important thing is that you keep this left shoulder open and relaxed. You want to be probably, I would recommend, center, and we're going to talk about this as the video progresses, but a big part of your throwing motion is your backstroke, how you take the football back, and when you do that, you have to rotate your front shoulder back. Now, a lot of guys that hold the ball on the right pec, their front shoulder is kind of halfway rotated, so sometimes when they start their motion, they tend to rip open with their left side, causing their body to lean, which can lead to some accuracy inefficiencies. So what we want to have, guys, front shoulders open, ball is nice and relaxed. If we're relaxed with my traps and we're comfortable, we have a lot more range of motion, and our throwing mechanics will actually be better because of it. So let's talk about the backstroke now, you guys. Where should you get when your front foot is making contact with the ground? And we're going to talk about the lower body in a second, but I feel like the upper body is much easier for everybody to understand, so that's why we're starting out with it. So you're in that relaxed ball carriage position. A lot of quarterback coaches, old school, used to teach you want to get to 90 degrees as fast as possible. So when your front foot steps to the target, you want to lift the ball directly up to 90. But the issue with that, and why I feel like that's a little bit outdated, is simply because when you lift directly to 90, yes, in theory, you want to go 90 and then just straight up release. But your rotator cuff in your shoulder plays a crucial part in throwing the football and throwing the football efficiently. And your rotator cuff tends to work in two parts, right? So a lot of guys, what ends up happening, and some of you watching this can probably relate to that, when you throw, you tend to dip the ball kind of behind your head. The ball maybe goes behind your head, and that can lead to a lot of actual shoulder injuries, and you tend to miss high on throws, tend to miss low on throws, because you have this really wild over-the-top motion. That's what happens when you lift directly to 90. Your hips are what brings your arm through. Our hips are the most important part of our throwing motion. We're going to get to that in a second. But if you're here and you go straight to 90, when your hips start to rotate through, your rotator cuff has to work in two parts. So if it goes 1, 2, then it dips behind your head. Where you want to be with the backstroke, a lot of quarterback coaches say you want to get to an L. I'm not one of those guys. If you get to the L, I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong, because it's actually right. But you need some type of backstroke opposite position, like opposite 90, if you will. Some guys go back and the nose is down. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it works for some quarterbacks. Some guys go up. We don't want to do that because your wrist tends to break and you throw a bad spiral. So I say anywhere in this range. I'm more of like not straight down, but I'm definitely not up, and I'm definitely not parallel. I'm more so about here. But if you're there on the foot strike, your hip rotation coming through can keep that arm slot a little bit away from you, a little bit on the lower side of things, not really high and not over your head, and you could get to a point called extension faster, which is where your elbow, shoulder, and wrist extend, which helps with accuracy on throws and spin rate on throws. So a lot of guys that go to here don't have the tightest spiral. They might throw a spiral, but it's not the tightest because they're not whipping their arm through. So when that front foot gets down, some type of backstroke, so your hip rotation brings you up to vertical 90, and that vertical 90 could be here, right next to your face, and you could snap and get to extension faster. Now, fellas, before we get into the other aspects of the throwing motion and what they look for at the Division I level, if you're a QB or a wide receiver watching this, we're going to be traveling out to 9 more states across the entire U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps this offseason, fellas. So guys, go to that very first link in the description below if you would like to sign up. We're going to be coming out to Seattle, Washington. That camp is completely sold out, but then we'll be heading out to Chicago, Illinois. Then we'll be coming out to Newark, New Jersey, Birmingham, Alabama, Houston, Texas, Boston, Massachusetts, Columbus, Ohio, Boise, Idaho, and finishing off our camp tour in Los Angeles, California. So guys, go to that very first link in the description below if you would like to sign up. All of those camps, Chicago through Los Angeles, we only have about 5 spots remaining, simply because we limit spots so each athlete we work with can get individualized coaching and individualized attention. That's a big philosophy of what we do. We feel that athletes do not learn when you're in a big, massive group group and it's just trying to go as fast as possible. So guys, you want to sign up, very first link in that description below. We'd love to have you there. So now fellas, let's talk about our throwing base. So when it comes down to your legs, the most like older school quarterback coaches used to teach this really wide base. They would say, and this is, again, I disagree fully with this, where your inside arch of your feet should be even with the outside part of your shoulders. Now the issue with that is that you have this like natural knee cave of both of your legs, and when your back knee is caving here, like the argument is with this wide base, you're gonna take a shorter front stride, and you will, but when your front stride gets down and your back foot is outside of your shoulder frame, you're actually not able to rotate and drive with your hips, which is a crucial part of our throwing velocity and taking pressure off of my throwing arm. So you end up throwing and your throwing elbow, like let's say I'm throwing this way, guys, and I have this really wide base. When I go to throw and when I'm rotating, my hip and my leg kind of trail behind my elbow and my shoulder, and we never want to get to that position. Where we want to be, they call it a C curve. Your hip and your knee should be ahead of your elbow and the ball. You want the ball to chase your hip. You see how like kind of if you drew to draw it out, it looks like the letter C? That's where you want to be. That's proper rotation for power, and it takes pressure off of your arm. So how do we achieve that? It's definitely not by being in the wide base. You want to think your shins should be straight and both feet should be under your armpits. Now the thing about this is you have to be more conscious of taking a short front stride. So it's a little bit harder for those guys that have that long baseball type stride. But again, it takes repetition, just like a lot of this stuff. Throwing mechanics, guys, it's about repping the boring stuff over and over and over again. So setting up a tripod, a camera, whatever, and just throwing and working on your mechanics is one of the best ways that you can be a more efficient passer, because as QBs, we need a lot of reps of our mechanical work, especially with our base. So like I said, and we're gonna talk about where our weight should be. Should we be 50-50? Should we have our weight back in a second? But you guys want your feet underneath your armpits, your shins should be straight, so when you take a short front step and you're in your backstroke position like we talked about, those hips can actually rotate through and go through before this. Taking pressure off the arm, for those of you that struggle with arm pain, this is great for you. And again, a lot of guys love to push. We don't want to do that. It's a step, feet stay underneath my frame, and my hips rotate through before the shoulders do. Good for power and takes pressure off the arm. But that is the perfect throwing base that they're going to want to see at the next level as this QB position grows. All right, so now let's talk about weight distribution, what should happen on your stride, and your front shoulder being able to rotate. So this concept with our throwing mechanics, like the QB position, guys, every single year you see guys pop up on social media, you see like more so NFL guys talking about it when they interview them about their mechanics. Everybody's turning into a more rotational, like rotary torque type throwers, because as QBs we are rotational athletes, but it's very, very important where we generate our rotation from and the timing in which the rotation happens in my throwing motion. And I will explain all of that with this concept called hip and shoulder, or upper body and lower body dissociation, something a lot of quarterbacks lack, a lot of quarterback coaches don't understand, so it's not taught, and that trickle down effect affects a lot of young QBs. Because the thing is, the whole reason why all this is important, why using your hips is important, is for accuracy, efficiency, your release gets faster, but more importantly, it takes pressure off your arm. Mechanics are important because you have a longer lifespan with this shoulder and with this elbow of yours. This is why 7-on-7 really pisses me off with a lot of young quarterbacks, because like a lot of young QBs, they have this really bad habit of push, all arm, and then reps and reps and reps of that leads to a lot of injuries in younger quarterbacks, and your quarterback lifespan decreases. You only have a certain amount of throws, guys, but if you're throwing properly, you have as many throws as you want. A great guy to look up is like Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan talked about how ever since he started transitioning to more of a rotational thrower, he'll be at training camp throwing hundreds of reps back-to-back days, and his arm doesn't even get tired. That's what this stuff does for you, and they are looking for this in quarterbacks at the next level. Who knows how to throw, but who knows how to throw the right way. They don't just care that the ball gets there anymore. They want the ball to get there, and they want you to look the part and be efficient, because they know that they have a long-term guy in you. So hip and shoulder, upper body and lower body dissociation is what's most important to get to that point. So we talked about our base, right? You want your feet to be inside your armpits, but where you want your body weight to be shifted is on this back leg. A lot of guys like 50-50. I'm not the biggest fan of it. I like guys to be about 60 to 65% on this back leg and shifted here nice and light on their front foot, almost like a fighting, like Muay Thai kickboxing stance. So nice and light on their back foot. Now, remember we talked about you have to be conscious with the short stride. When you take that short stride, you want to try to pretend that there is a flashlight on your knee, and you don't want the flashlight to turn towards the target. It's a split second, but this makes a world of difference for so many QBs. Flashlight on the knee, you take a stride. That flashlight stays pointed outwards. When you do that, that's when you go to your backstroke, right? Remember that like backstroke position, that opposite L or thereabouts? And when you do that, your front shoulder, this is why it's important that I need to be open and the ball needs to be in the middle of my chest, rotates back. That's upper body and lower body dissociation. They're going in opposite directions. You're striding to the target, but your shoulders are back. But since your base was good, you weren't wide, you kept your weight on your back leg. When you keep that weight on the back leg, that allows you to rotate your shoulders back. So many QBs do this. Their flashlight turns on the foot strike, but when your weight shifts to your front foot, you can't rotate your shoulders back. So you do one of these, and you just end up pushing the ball. There's no separation, right? Everybody sees Dak Prescott and CJ Stroud doing those drills. That's what it's from. So we keep our weight back here, we stride, we rotate my shoulders back. This is the magic spot. So now after this, what happens? Your hips start to rotate through, and that's when we could get to that C-curve position. But it starts at the base, starts at the ball carriage, starts with how you take the ball back, and the weight distribution is what ties it all together. So now how do we get my hips to rotate through more efficiently? How do I start tweaking little things with that to make it even better? And that's what we're going to talk about next. So now a lot of guys have a lot of different opinions on once you get to this position, front foot's down, backstroke here, what brings you through? A lot of QB coaches teach the whole like just pivot, which I'm not mad at. I don't think that's a bad thing to teach. I think your hips will definitely rotate through if you do that. A lot of guys used to teach like, hey, pick this back foot up. I don't like that because I feel like when quarterbacks pick this foot up, their front hip never really rotates open. A lot of people, they like, when they say drive your hips and rotate your hips, a lot of people think just drive the back hip. So they'll do this, but their front hip is what needs to open. Like you got to pretend that somebody has their hands on the front of your shorts and they're pulling you here. So when guys tend to do that like pivot, their front hip definitely opens. Two issues I see with the pivot. One is that a lot of guys will pivot and they stay back and their chest is almost facing up towards the sky. That makes the ball tend to miss high. So what I recommend is if you're gonna do that pivot, you wanna finish in a position I call skyscraper, which means your head, your knee, and your foot are in a skyscraper. Your weight still transfers forward because it's not just about hips, it's also about transferring your weight. That weight that you have loaded, that 60-65% back here, needs to transfer. So you need to make sure it's not just hips, it's also hips and lower body weight transfer. Now, the other issue I see with the pivot, hard to do while I'm moving in the pocket. Like, you're telling me I'm in the pocket here, I got a 300-pound defensive end coming off the edge, I'm gonna step up and just pivot? A little bit unlikely in my opinion. So I'm more of a drag guy. Now, by back foot drag, I don't mean doing this. I mean you're pivoting off of your big toe, just like a baseball swing, but you're dragging after the pivot. So I'm here, I'm set up, I stride to the target, my shoulders go back, I'm pivoting, but I'm dragging. Now, I know my turns a lot, like that's a little gross if you ask me, but you don't have to get to that far, but that turnover is what we need. We still need my front hip to open up. And I feel that's more efficient because when I move, I can do that. So I'm more of a drag guy. Some people like the pivot. I'm not gonna say the pivot's wrong. Just make sure if you're doing the pivot, you finish skyscraper and you're comfortable maybe dragging a little bit more when you have to move in the pocket. But that is probably the more efficient ways to get that upper body to sling through from that hip and shoulder dissociation. Now, to finish off this video, we're gonna discuss where you should be at the finish point of your throw for accuracy. Now also, fellas, if you're a quarterback watching this and you guys would like a 2-month daily workout schedule that you can follow, go to that second link in the description below for our elite quarterback training package. It's 2 months of gym workouts and on-field training drills for QBs. We map out every single drill and give a video example of each one. We give you the exact sets and reps in the gym and on the field for 2 full months. So if you want to take your quarterback skills to the next level, we also include a video on how you can read defenses as a quarterback. We break down every single defensive coverage to help with the IQ side of things as well. So guys, you want access to that? Second link in that description below. We'd love to have you on there. So let's talk about the finish of the throw. So I think a lot of older school quarterback coaches used to teach 2 things to generate power, but they weren't really necessarily thinking about release point and accuracy when they taught these things. So a lot of old school QB coaches used to teach, okay, you want to take your left elbow, they'd say, maybe not the most politically correct thing to say, but they would say elbow the midget. So like there's a little person, or whatever you call them nowadays, is standing right next to you, and what you want to do is you want to pull that elbow down, and that elbow pull is going to help you with power. But the issue is, look where my release goes when I do that. Even if I have that perfect backstroke position, but then I pull this down, my release point gets pushed high. So I'm missing high on throws, I release it late, I'm missing low on throws. So you don't want to do that. Where you want to be, guys, you want to keep your front hand like you're eating a sandwich. That's your magic spot. You start to rotate through, hand eating the sandwich. Now, a lot of guys do that, and I think that's a very, very, very old school way of teaching the elbow pull down. I had coaches teach me that in high school, which wasn't that long ago, which is a little crazy to me. It's bad coaching, but anyways. Keeping it up by your face is good. A lot of QB coaches, though, don't teach enough stability in the front shoulder, because that's what causes guys to miss left and right. So a lot of guys will go back here, they keep the hand up by the face, but coaches tell them you want to take the back of your right shoulder, so your throwing side, and replace where your left shoulder was. So your chest should almost be facing the opposite sideline. That's wrong. That's how a lot of QBs tend to do something called over-rotating. So let's say your front foot gets down, your shoulders go back, your weight stays back. What are we supposed to rotate through with? Our hips. But if my hips and my shoulders are both going that way, that's too much rotation, you guys. We want my upper body to stay stable, so my release can stay inside. I don't want my release to be there. I want it to be inside of my frame. I don't want it to be here. I want it to be inside of my frame. 90 degree, not a super high arm slot, not super low. Somewhere in this range is where I want to be, because I could get to extension faster, and that helps with spin on the ball and accuracy and just release time. So a lot of guys, when the hips go this way and that shoulder goes that way, it gets pushed out wide and they come across. If you're one of those dudes that goes this way when you throw, it's probably because you're ripping your shoulder open. So we want to think you want to stay square to your receiver. Hips and shoulders, you should be able to draw a square facing the target with the hand up by the face. So I go back, my hips decide to rotate me through, bam. I tell my QBs, try to touch your throwing shoulder to your front hand. If you're rotating this way, it's pretty hard to do that. So it helps you stay square so that release is inside your frame, and we can extend much faster. So if you could get to there on your finish, I truly believe everything that we discussed, that's like the icing on the cake to help you be more efficient and more accurate for that Division I level throwing motion.